Typical American soldier with some sort of leather cap with Congress painted on the front. A bit of a caricature, but not without some truth in it. Each soldier was supposed to receive 2 shirts. Each soldier was supposed to receive either a pair of overalls, a term coined trousers which go all the way down to the ankle, have a buttons as well as a vamp piece there to prevent stones from falling into your shoe. The soldier was also alternately supposed to receive a pair of leather breeches, a leather waistcoat with sleeves, or a flannel waistcoat with sleeves. The soldier was also supposed to receive a hunting shirt, this newfangled garment that Washington seemed to like, and a blanket. And all of this was totaled up to be valued at 20 continental dollars. Now each colonial legislature had the option of giving the men something else as long as it was to the value of one part of the continental bounty, or they could pay the difference. So for instance, the soldiers of the 4th Pennsylvania Battalion, they received relatively nice coats instead of hunting shirts, but they had to pay the difference out of stoppages from their wages. Now each one of these different garments represents a potential different path that Continental Army uniforms could go on. We of course have the one problem. As soon as the war begins, we're cut off from all of the English supplies that we've had. The English Royal Navy very clearly blockades American ports, and so we're just not going to get new stuff in until French alliances kick in. We start getting more and more French cloth shipped over as part of that. With that said, there's lots and lots of material already in merchant stores, and there is some domestic production. But there's different ideas for what the American soldiers are going to look like, including up here. Now, one of the first ideas that comes along is going to be these, Massachusetts bounty coats. Massachusetts legislature in July of 1775 decides that each soldier, here you go, grab it, should receive a simple tradesman's jacket made of drab or brown wool. The regiment that they are in should be indicated by the buttons, and these were to be made up, at least initially, in the township where they were from, with a label then put on the inside, which you can see right there, naming what town it was made in, so that they could be baled up, put on wagons, shipped to wherever the regiment was, which presumably would be organized by all those folks from the same township, and then issued out to the men of that town. Now the drab tradesman's jacket, the idea was, A, that this war ideally is going to be a short one, so that as soon as the men could go home, they would have a useful jacket that they could wear in their civilian life once more. It also made a very strong political statement. It said that this is an army of tradesmen, merely standing up for the rights, not a proper European army, making it different, not an army set on conquest. There's one idea. Another idea is going to come from Washington himself. Now, if anyone's seen sort of movie versions of Last of the Mohicans, you'll see lots and lots of these guys running around wearing hunting shirts like this. Unfortunately, that's terrifically apocryphal. Don't trust movies. However, the hunting shirt does come about. It seems to appear as a garment worn vernacularly in in a swath in the Appalachian Mountains from western Pennsylvania down through Virginia. And it appears quite suddenly right around between the years of 1770 and 1774 when we have Dunmore's War. And it's instantly associated with the riflemen, so the long hunters of old who come from that area. It takes, of course, the Germanic influence of bringing rifles, which were ethnically a German thing, to Pennsylvania to make it available in that area. Now the rifle shirt, quite early on, thanks to a bunch of riflemen, actually both legitimate riflemen as well as wealthy Baltimore sons who like to dress up in riflemen's clothes and have the money to go out and buy a rifle, all of them showing up around Boston in the middle of 1775, quite quickly gets the British familiar with the rifle shirt, rifle frock, hunting shirt, whatever you want to call it. And so part of Washington's idea is that equipping an entire army in these might well make them look all like riflemen, make it easier, harder to distinguish for the British. Part of the idea, too, is tapping into an entirely different part of American industry. Garments like that, even relatively simple tradesmen's jackets, are the product of tailoring. So you have to start out with paper pattern pieces, trace them out onto cloth, cut them out, sew them up. This is man's work. Tailoring is, and I imagine ever shall be, a male-dominated trade. However, the production of body linens, shirts, shifts, as well as table linens and bed linens, that was considered women's work, which allows for these hunting shirts to be produced on what we would call today the home front. And to say that's something that, with one simple pattern for the cape here, these could be produced by women waiting back home for hopefully their soldiers to return. It's also one that gives a very cheap, uniform appearance to all soldiers. You could drape it over whatever civilian clothing or whatever bounty clothing they receive, creating a very uniform appearance. There's also some suggestion too, especially you see it much more in places like Virginia, that it makes a political statement. This is a uniquely American garment, and so in some ways represents a unique American identity. So that's one idea. Another thought that comes around is to make an American version of British regimental coats. Not without precedent, back during the French and Indian War, we'll see American versions of British regimental coats being worn on soldiers who come up here. Sometimes they might be in red coats faced with yellow, as in Connecticut troops. Might be blue faced with red, and there'll be some weirder combinations as the French and Indian War goes on. Now, one of the things that the Americans decide to do with these coats, part of it's a matter of style, but they decide to have them be cut short. And the British Army would describe these as coatees, or perhaps second clothing coats. That implied that they were light infantry in the British Army. And so they're elite men chosen for their ability to act independently, trained to shoot at marks, trained to be nimble and fast. Not a bad idea to express through uniforms. We also see details like the pointed cuff and other potential light infantry detail. However, the other advantage about having a short coat is doesn't get caught on the woods.
Less material.
Less material. It takes a half of a yard less material to make this coat. We know for contractors quite early on, based on their advertisements for procuring coats, as well as Washington's innumerable complaints, he'll talk about the fact that these are made terribly, potentially with lapels just stitched down, non-functional. Likewise, only partially or sometimes not lined at all. It's a quick, cheap garment that produces something that soldiers can wear that gives some uniform appearance. Perhaps the last idea with which we could see soldiers being clothed is going to be with this. Now, a lot of us think about, well, on the battlefield, when you're cold, you're going to go up and you're going to take that British soldier's coat and you're going to wear it. False. No. What actually happens is the Americans end up having quite a bit of good luck in the winter of 1775 and spring of 1776. The first piece of good luck is when the American Army enters into Montreal in late November, they run into the regimental stores of the British 7th Foot and the British 26th Foot. And that includes that winter's clothing for the regiment. As they continue pushing eastward on towards Montreal, they will capture, sitting in the harbor, the next spring's clothing issue on board ships, again for the 7th and 26th Foot. Very far from stealing it off of dead soldiers, they will in fact, General Richard Montgomery will petition the Continental Congress for the funds with which to pay the British soldiers themselves for capturing their clothing, so that these coats could be issued out to soldiers in the Continental Army who would in fact pay by deductions from their wages to receive a captured British coat. Now this good luck continues in the spring of 1776 as the Americans finally capture Boston, with the British naval fleet evacuating from there. Unfortunately, they don't pass the memo along to many British merchant ships already en route from England. And so 3 supply ships, including one with about a company's worth of soldiers of the 71st or one of the Highland regiments, just pull right into Boston Harbor and ask where they can unload all this stuff. And so coats from the 22nd and 40th Foot end up being dropped off as another complete uniform issue and then shipped all the way up here to be added to Northern Department stores so that those as well could be issued out to American soldiers. Again, they would have to pay for them, so that's going to be a great addition. Now we would expect that, well, are these men going to do anything with these coats? They wouldn't just wear a British coat with the rest of the American soldiers, right?
repurpose them?
It appears actually that they wear them exactly as is. We have deserters from the 3rd New York Regiment who were up here, and those deserter descriptions from about June of 1776 describe men leaving in scarlet coats faced with buff, 22nd or 40th foot, completely unaltered. Now, again, this probably comes back to that conception of movies. Are these guys really out in big long lines where they might well be confused for a British soldier? No. And these guys are dug in behind trenches. And so wearing another British coat, that's fine. Now I guess I would ask you guys, which one of these various options is the most American? What? Well, which garment represents the brown one? The tradesman's jacket?
The hunting jacket.
It's the most plain? Yeah. Alright. Washington will go on to recommend sailor's jackets, very similar to that as one potential option. Which one of these colors is the American one? What? None of them. None of them represent the most American. In fact, if you were to say anything, potentially the brown could be the most American. We find lots and lots of descriptions in 1776 of continental coats. So not necessarily worn by the whole Continental Army, but we see the Continental Congress rules to have one establishment, akin to the British Army, where all the various colonies' regiments will be brought together in one sequential order. The majority of those are going to be in brown coats with different colored lapels. Brown cloth appears to be the only cloth that was produced in large numbers in America. There's one particular cloth which comes up quite often, that is Wilton cloth. Wilton cloth is actually an American-made copy of proper Wilton cloth, which was produced in Wilton, England. Known for its drab brown color, it was produced in large amounts in southeastern Massachusetts. You see a lot of them would be in there. However, we know from descriptions of captured British coats, they describe even the lining material, which you can see right there, as better than many of the coats made out of American homespun, American wool. We know that in this fort itself, all of this clothing, this bounty that was sent up here, whatever the form, was not enough. Plans were made as early as July 6th, so while the Army was still considering moving here, plans were already in the works to send cloth and send replacement uniforms up here. Much as the Army was using these men to produce trenches, cannon carriages, oak beams, all that great stuff, the Army is full of tailors. And so we find in general orders in these various orderly books that tailors are to be drawn from the various regiments and sent into this fort to produce more replacement clothing. We've got a wonderful orderly book from the 4th Pennsylvania Battalion's quartermaster, John Hartman. In that orderly book, he lays out exactly what cloth he was drawing from the Northern Department stores. Things like 20 yards of brown cloth, clothing. Things like 12 yards of striped napped serge. And in one entry, he writes down that he's going to draw 12 yards of purple, and then he crosses that out. It wasn't purple anymore. It just puts down light color, napped cloth. This Army ends up, albeit better clothed through the summer of 1776. It actually ends up in many ways less uniform, as these odd lots of cloth are used, made, and produced into clothing right here inside the fort, with which to either re-equip the men or give them something to purchase out of their own wages.
So it's more like a quilt army.
In many ways, yeah. Yeah.
Was it one size fits all?
Absolutely not. Clothing was generally produced in 3 standard sizes. However, once that clothing was delivered to a regiment, we would see tailors from the regiment, so guys who used to be tailors in their civilian life, immediately refitting all that clothing to match. Just like actually this tailor's doing right here. This coat was produced in a large standard size. It doesn't quite fit the soldier correctly, so right now he is redoing the sleeves so that it will fit them. So very far from being ragtag, they might well be in different colors, but all of the clothing would be fit to what Washington described as close but without constraint.
How long does it take to make one of these coats?
12 hours for a pair of breeches, 25 hours for a pair of overalls, 20 hours for a simple coat, 5 to 6 hours for a waistcoat, about 30 hours for a proper shirt, hats about 10 hours, leather caps about 5 hours,
Wow.
12 hours for a pair of shoes.
And
We
I
need-
notice he's not using a thimble.
I noticed that too.
That's blowing my mind.
Perseverance and patriotism are his thimble. With that said, guys, we'll follow up with